not speak nearly that long, but I know we are about to vote on the Congressional Review Act on an issue that I happen to disagree with the president on. My whole career has been standing up for workers. My whole career has been standing up for sometimes to presidents of both parties. And I think if you look at the history of trade in this country and what we've done, we've seen, frankly, that this body, that down the hall in the House of Representatives and in the White House have historically not stood up for workers. I grew up in Mansfield, Ohio, in a small industrial city, about 50,000 people. It was a very industrial city, less so now, but I went to Johnny Appleseed Junior High School, and I remember walking the halls with the sons and daughters of machinists who worked at Tap and Stove, and rubber workers that worked for Mansfield Tire, and steel workers at Empire Reeves, I believe was the company's name then, auto workers who worked at General Motors, a number of electrical workers at Westinghouse, and, Madam President, also the sons and daughters of people in the trades, electricians and carpenters, insulators and pipe fitters, plumbers and operating engineers and laborers, people highly skilled who build America. And as companies, as corporations, throughout particularly in my part of the country, but in Nevada everywhere, corporations began to shut down plants in the industrial Midwest. They moved those plants to low-wage areas, Alabama, Mississippi, Louisiana, Georgia, North and South Carolina especially. And because those wages weren't quite low enough to satisfy the greed, I think there's no other word, the greed of corporate America, then those same companies began to lobby Congress. And one of my first votes as a member of Congress many years ago was in opposition to the North American Free Trade Agreement. And those of us who opposed NAFTA predicted with almost certainty what was inevitably going to happen. Once you pass a trade agreement giving these companies the opportunity to go to Mexico and then to China with no tariffs, going for very low wages to exploit workers in those countries, which is what they did, you begin to see plants shut down. And Madam President, we know what happened. We know that far too many of our colleagues in the House and Senate were willing to pass these trade agreements like NAFTA. We also know that down the hall, the House of Representatives did the same thing, the Senate did it, and frankly, we had presidents of both parties who sold out American workers. And the lobbyists were here pushing for NAFTA, pushing later for PNTR with China, weakening the rules there so that these companies, they were up and gone. They left Ohio, they left Indiana, they left Illinois, they left so much of the industrial Midwest. And because this Congress and presidents of both parties, from Trump all the way back to Clinton, I would include Obama and Bush, both Bushes, and Clinton and Trump, that they were willing to sell out American workers to the lobbyists who pushed for these trade agreements that they could seek cheaper wages in China. And another thing that happened with China, Madam President, was that what we did when we moved all these jobs to China was we built up the Chinese military because we provided the technology and the wealth to the Chinese Communist Party, who then were able to build up a high-tech military, not quite rivaling ours, but certainly dangerous enough that we paid attention. My vote against NAFTA was one of my proudest votes, and my vote against PNTR with China, most favored nation status for China. So we're seeing what that has yielded. In the end, it's a simple choice. Whose side are you on? Are you the side of the Chinese Communist Party or the side of American workers? And that, to me, what this vote is about today, the Congressional Review Act about solar tariffs. I would add, full disclosure, one of the biggest solar manufacturers, I believe still the biggest single solar manufacturing plant in America, is near Toledo, just south of Toledo in northwest Ohio. Those workers will benefit if we vote yes and then override the president's veto. It's what I urge my colleagues to do today, to pass this simple resolution, to continue these tariffs on China, because as long as they keep cheating, as long as American companies are willing to take the products from slave labor and underpaid labor and exploited labor and bring them into this country, these problems will continue for our industrial base. I heard the President of the United States down the hall at the I believe his last State of the Union, saying the term Rust Belt, we are burying the term Rust Belt. I've talked to the president about bearing that term. He mentioned it that day on the State of the Union that evening. And mostly we're starting to in this country. We're seeing a reindustrialization of America. We're seeing chips now. Chips were invented in the United States. 90% of them were made mostly in Taiwan and China. The light bulb was invented by an Ohioan, Thomas Edison, he grew up not far from where I grew up. Now 100% of LEDs are made overseas. So if we're going to reindustrialize this country, bring these jobs back, that's what the CHIPS legislation is all about. That's what we are doing with Intel in Columbus. This sets us back. This president's veto of this bill sets us back a couple more years in redeveloping, bringing these jobs back, doing the kind of insourcing that Senator Casey and others have fought for here. So I'll wrap up asking my colleagues to vote yes on this Congressional Review Act on solar tariffs, because again, it's whose side are you on? Are you on the side of the Chinese Communist Party or on the side of American workers? To me, it's as clear as day which side to be on. Thank you, Madam President.